So I think we should address the elephant in the room and actually talk about menstrual cycle, right? So first of all, we need to know that estrogen isn't equivalent to testosterone in males. So it gives you that natural advantage or readiness to perform. It's actually an ergogenic aid. So the spike of estrogen allows female athletes to adapt better to volume, to intensity, to the type of training, to recover faster. Thermoregulation is at its highest. So if you have to compete in the high temperatures and you've got that estrogen surge, actually your body will do absolutely great.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to Last Stroke Counts. Today's guest is the co-founder of Light Blue Clinic, strength and performance coach for the Cambridge University Bow Club on the men's side, and female physiology expert. Please welcome Gosia Bieniek to the podcast.
Hello. It's great to be here.
Thanks for having us. We've come down to see you today at your clinic in Cambridge, which is incredibly impressive. It looks really awesome here. Hopefully we'll do a little walk around video and people can kind of see what it looks like. But yeah, I'm really excited. We're going to go over a few things, but we've talked a lot previously about this kind of female health in sports stuff, and it's big, and we mentioned it with Paddy and all the rest of it, but we've not actually had someone who really can get into the nuts and bolts of it. So really excited to get into that as well.
We're pretty tired of three blokes sitting at a table talking about menstrual cycles, so we thought we might as well bring someone who's qualified.
I come to the rescue. It's fine.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I guess first, just kind of would be interesting to see how you came to the decision to start this place and how long you've been doing it and what it does really.
Yeah, so we are in the first cryotherapy center based in Cambridge called Light Blue Clinic. My partner, Miłosz, and me are both in charge of the place. So we established Light Blue Clinic in 2019. That was the first year when we worked with CUBC men. Previously, Miłosz worked for the women's side under the coach Rob Baker. And then when Rob Baker decided got an opportunity to coach the men's side, we moved with him to the men's side as well. So at the very beginning, it was just Goldie Boat House. So we've got a little physio room over there, and we've got a waiting room that we're trying to hold on to because it becomes a storage once in a while. So we have to hold on to it really tightly. And then after 3 years, we had an opportunity to open this place. We've been working really hard on our investors to kind of sell the idea to them of cryotherapy. Cryotherapy doesn't really exist it does exist in the UK, but it's not very widely used. So it still needs quite a lot of education, but we see many teams, getting benefits and using it on a regular basis. So we just decided to combine cryotherapy with what we were already doing, which is strength and conditioning and osteopathy and general treatment.
Yeah. Awesome. And we're going to get a bit more into cryotherapy, I think, with Miłosz later on. Yes. So we'll leave that for.
Don't worry.
And then just in terms of how did you first get involved in rowing? You don't have a background in rowing yourself.
No, so it actually came with Miłosz. So I can say that we are a couple. We have a child together, but we also professionally do very similar things. So Miłosz started working with CUBC, then I moved to Cambridge, and I was kind of slowly introduced to the rowing world. My background in essence is in volleyball and track cycling and swimming, so I had an opportunity to work with various athletes at various levels and different sports, which kind of opened my head to the fact that you don't have to be a specialist in one sport. You can learn the sport. As long as you know how to prepare the body for the demands of the sport, you can do it. The question is is the head coach open enough to trust you if you don't have that background? Because obviously it's easier to trust someone that has been working within that sport.
Yeah, we've talked before a few times though about how rowing is so set in its ways. I think people who are willing to look outside and get people to come and have a look that don't necessarily have a background in rowing can be pretty good. And at the end of the day, if you combine volleyball, track cycling and swimming, that's all the movement. I don't think there's any extra movements from rowing. It's only got one body.
A little rotation.
Yeah, a bit of rotation. Volleyball.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I love the fact that, like, you know, if you can like cross apply your knowledge across disciplines, then you're not going to miss out on like any fresh ideas and also like different ways of like looking at the same problem. Like, I always think it's like good to get a few different opinions on a topic in order to like come to the best conclusion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think gives you relax a little bit more as well, because if you don't know things straight away in terms of how people move, you just observe them, you just spend more time with the head coaches, and obviously if they want to spend that time with you and explain more, you just learn as you go along. And obviously if results follow, that's great. Then that's obviously a different conversation. But at the very beginning, it's about building the trust with people who are really in charge, because you're like, we talked about it at the beginning, S&C coach is like 5th or even 6th in command. Like, it's also sometimes very difficult because your ego wants to be like, come on, like I'm helping, I'm preparing them. But really, as long as you know where your place is and you're there for them, I think that's the most important thing as well. I mean, obviously teach them how to move, but also be there on a daily basis with the struggles that they wouldn't necessarily tell the head coach, for example.
Yeah,
so they're gonna be first to share it with a physio or an S&C coach.
Yeah, I definitely have had quite a few physio sessions turn into therapy sessions at the same time.
Which is like a part of the whole gig, I think.
Yeah, and also having like physios and coaches kind of butt heads. Sometimes it's difficult, you know, when you want the best for the athlete and they've got a result they need to produce. Like, that can be difficult. I'm interested to see, like, initially coming into the sport, like, what did you think of it? Were you like, these people are all insane, or like, you know, how the hell are they putting their bodies through this without doing any core work or not doing, like, how was that?
How honest do you want me to be? Because they're always going to be listening to this.
I think it's good if we're doing things wrong, we should know about it.
It's not that. With rowing, it had to grow on me. My love for the sport, or kind of my passion for the sport, let's put it this way. Because I'm more coming from the background of power sports. So what excites me as a coach is fast movement, fast lifts, jumping high. So more of the like short outburst exercises. So the endurance side of it was always a riddle for me, in the sense that I understand you're there with your head most of the time, but there isn't much happening, right? Like, you're not chasing the ball, like you have to throw weights around. So that was that side that was, I think, missing in terms of what type of a coach I was, to understand why are they doing this? Why are you guys choosing rowing over any other sport? Because I understand the idea of like being in the boat and the panorama changing and racing side by side, but daily grind is very difficult, right? Okay, to kind of stay on top. And most of our athletes are excited because they do weights with us, because it's something else, right? So what they do.
I mean, weights are the most fun right? sessions of the entire training program. But like, I guess the grind becomes worth it once you've been in a boat and you understand it. So like, I'm curious, like, have you ever like gotten out in a boat yourself?
No, because it took me a very long time for my athletes to have any respect for me. So I think they saw me rowing, that would just disappear. I never had a chance. I might be like interested with someone who's, you know, was able to help me. But once I coach athletes in a certain sport, I try to stay away from that sport and just help them. I think it's also the gender thing with me, that I need to be 3 times better person than an average guy to be where I am. Honestly, that is the reality. So I could lose very quickly. So I'm trying to stay away from rowing, but I wouldn't mind, you know, trying one day.
You can do it for fun.
Help me.
Yeah, you don't have to be the best in the world.
You, but like these Cambridge lot, not necessarily.
I totally understand. We'll try and do it correctly at some point. Get you out with the boat.
Fabulous. I like that.
Yeah. I guess then, like, let's get into it then. So the female health in sport. Again, like, how did you kind of start finding yourself specializing in that, and how was that process?
So COVID happened, and that's usually a turning point for many people realizing, what do I actually want to do next? Is there anything else that I can do with my career or what I'm doing? I came across Dr. Stacey Sims first, and it was one of the TEDx talks. Oh, yeah. Yes, that's what I saw first, and it was mind-opening. I listened to her talking about endocrine system, how it impacts training periodization, how it impacts the way we should sequence exercises with females, how we recover, thermoregulation, that estrogen is that actually an ergogenic aid, which means that it aids with recovery, with perception of load, with the intensity of training. And then I did my master's in S&C, and no one ever mentioned endocrine system. I mean, we did cover endocrine system, but not in the differences of training adaptation between males and females. And then suddenly there's that niche. We talked about it a few weeks ago when we met. Like, everyone is looking for that little percent. How am I going to get better? How can we do it? So hence recovery, sleeping, eating, coming up with all of those little things where we actually forgetting about the most basic thing, how females adapt versus how male adapt. Yeah. And that kind of just opened my head. I literally couldn't sleep for 3 months when I started listening to it, started reading research. I was like, how is that overlooked? Like, how? Anyway, yes, that was the beginning of my journey with female athletes.
We talk a lot in rowing about like free speed, or if you do this, it's like free speed. And I think that's what's like, for me, like fascinating and exciting to see that there actually seems to be this kind of area in women's sport where there is something that everyone else isn't doing. And like I said, a lot of it's like, seems crazy to think like all the studies are done with men, like all this information that's come on how everything is best to do, all this, like, you know, the most up-to-date physiological training programs and everything, it's all just based on studies with men, which is crazy. And then I was reading one of them books, like a little bit, like one thing I realized, well, number one, the fact that like hormones can go like 7 times higher. And it's like estrogen, progesterone can go from like 100 to 700 every month.
Yes.
Like, how, I'm thinking that's not going to have an effect.
Also, just one thing, you guys, I don't want to simplify your physiology, but the reality is that what females experience within 30 days, more or less 30 days, 28 to 40 days, actually, depending on how long the cycle is, you rarely experience that in your life, what we go through with those 40 days. So it just swings, which is so, like, I'll go into details how menstrual cycle works, but your body is mainly governed by testosterone, human growth hormone, and cortisol levels. And we kind of just deal with that for your lifetime. Whereas with us, with the menstrual cycle, you've got 4 different hormones. You've got estrogen, progesterone, FSH, which is follicular stimulating hormone, and LH, which is luteinizing hormone. So those 4 work together, but they really impact how we recover, thermoregulation, our mood, how much we weigh, which is a massive information for lightweight rowers. But you never go through that. Like, you never really have to master the dragon estrogen.
I think that's why it's also like hard to like for male coaches to possibly like sympathize with like what their athletes are going through, especially like over the course of a month.
Yes.
And then on repeat for the entire season, because it's a never-ending cycle.
Yeah. I mean, it is if you're on hormonal contraception, which we're going to talk about, because hormonal contraception suppresses ovulation. So you never really get to experience the highs and lows. But there is a list of side effects, and there is a downside to it. Obviously, its main, the main thing that the pill does is that it stops you from getting pregnant. But also the list of side effects, when you actually start thinking about it, is this actually healthy? That's also another conversation. I saw a film a few days ago when I was preparing for this conversation called The Business of Contraceptive Pill. Mind-opening to the point when you're thinking, what are we actually doing to our females? We're supposed to be liberating them to give them control over their reproductive health. But actually with the pill, we might be doing something else to them. But yeah, that's, I suppose, for another conversation.
I'm so glad we've managed to get this set up.
Me? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad we managed to get this set up and like are able to share this information. I think like you said, like girls need to understand also like how their bodies work in order for, and just women in general in order to like make the most out of their training and just like consciously make decisions on like, and know what's good for them, what works and what doesn't. Yes. I know you've prepared a little presentation and a few points that you want to like go over. So like that will be what?
Yeah, of course. I mean, where would you like me to start? Because we can start with nutrition to kind of RED-S and low energy availability to ease you in the idea of menstrual cycle. Does that sound?
Yeah, I mean, you let us know, like, where does it start? Where did you start?
I would probably...
Where did you pick up from?
Yeah, exactly. So if someone's like completely oblivious to all that knowledge, like, what's the easiest way to like introduce it to beginners?
I think the easiest point would be to start with nutrition. So energy availability, how it works, how much food you actually need to train, and then what happens when you don't eat enough to fuel for training or to basically be ready to train regularly and keep your body healthy. So with energy availability is linked to RED-S, which is relative energy deficiency in sport. Before it became RED-S, it was known as female athlete triad. So the female athlete triad is basically osteoporosis, lack of period, and eating disorders. As the time has passed, we've actually realized, the biggest brains in the world have realized that actually the triad is not only associated with female athletes, it's also male athletes who are struggling with it, not on the same level, but we still have to look after our male athletes in terms of nutrition and how much they're eating to fuel for training and to be ready to train and not put their health at risk. So in 2014, I think the Olympic Committee got together and then decided, the people who are in charge of research and research review, research papers, that actually there's more to female triad, that actually the psychological components, socio-economical components as well should be included, and we should expand it by male athletes as well. And it's very important to say that if you train, let's say you train twice a day, you do a regular training, if you don't eat enough to have enough energy and enough ATP in your bloodstream to train and produce energy out of it, with males, what happens is that obviously the energy expenditure is going to be higher than the energy intake. With them, it doesn't necessarily affect their endocrine system. It does, but not to a point where it affects females. So in females, what happens is that the endocrine system, we can say it shuts down. That's why the period stops. So if you're not eating enough, your body starts to focus on locomotion and thermoregulation, but it shuts off the endocrine system.
Is that like a cortisol thing?
No,
that was my understanding in men about when like a huge test.
So with males, what we do, we look at, if you look at someone who's fatigued, the first test you should be doing is cortisol testosterone ratio. So that tells you if the person is entering the, like a fatigue state. Yeah. So that would be an equivalent, which is less aggressive for the male body than the stop of the period for a female body.
Yeah.
So if you look at the NHS website, the lack of period for more than 3 months is called amenorrhea. So amenorrhea is the time when you basically don't have a period. And the biggest problem with it is that the longer it lasts, the more difficult it is to get out of it. Your bone density is going to be affected quite a lot. Your endocrine system will be affected to a point where thyroid, the first test that you can do is actually thyroid, so TSH. Mm-hmm. You can have a look what's happening there. Usually when we don't eat enough and the period stops, the thyroid will be all over the place. Then we would have to check for the 4 hormones that I mentioned at the beginning. So estrogen, progesterone, FSH, and LH, and just to see the levels. And DEXA scan is another one. The reality is that if you go to most GPs, they're going to say to you, you're training. Once you stop training, you'll be fine. So it's also very important to link with doctors who understand the issue and understand that if you train CUBC women and they're at their first year at the university, they're hoping to go through the program for another 3 years. They're not going to stop rowing in 3 years. So we're looking at lifelong problem with osteoporosis, not eating enough. So osteoporosis is brittle bones. So when your bones are really brittle and the risk of breaking your bones has the stress or fractures that happen with female athletes more often. The question is is the repetitive stress, is it the rowing, or is it actually the physiology that predisposes us to it? Mm-hmm. God, I started talking now, I kind of stopped.
I love it.
Because I can keep talking and talking about...
it's good. I've got some questions.
So basically, the first thing is that once you realize that you stop your period, more than 3 months, providing that you're not on any contraceptive pill or on just hormonal contraception in general, what you need to do is to go to your GP and say, listen, I haven't had my period for 3 months, and ask them for the tests, ask them for a DEXA scan, and the hormones. So TSH, LH, FSH, progesterone, estrogen. So that should be the first thing that we do, which is easier said than done. But if you're lucky enough to have private insurance, you can go and ask them, they will do it. If you're lucky enough to have a good relationship with your GP and you haven't had a blood test for a while, they will be able to do it for you as well. So that would be the first thing to do. Another thing to do is to start looking at how much you're eating. The thing is that if you want to get out of that situation, low energy availability, if you're already in it, the first thing to do would be to decrease the volume of training, which is always a very difficult battle that I would be having with the head coach, because endurance, you want to reduce the volume. This is not what we want to do. So the knowledge is still there that this is dangerous, but it's not acknowledged by the coaches. I mean, I think it is, but not to the point that they understand that you have to reduce the volume. You have to increase muscle mass, focus on hypertrophy. Give them at least a month or 2 months, see how they're doing. But not everyone. The thing is that you've got a competition, right? So you kind of think, okay, we're going to push these athletes for X amount of months and then they're going to recover. And then it's a vicious circle.
Yeah. Firstly, I'm going to, just because we're talking about this, I'm going to talk about some of the things which I'm sure are just wrong, but I think it's worth kind of debunking. So the one thing I heard, or was always explained, not that anyone's really talking to me about this, but women, the reason why women stop having their period is because their body fat goes too low. And that's the only reason, and there's nothing really else to do with it. It's obviously wrong, but I think it's something a lot of people think.
It's actually not that wrong. When you think about the fact that you're just not eating enough, then naturally your body composition is going to change. So yes, fat will go down. However, there is a certain amount of fat percentage that we should not be going below. So your female body is going to hold on to it just in case if it ever wants to get pregnant. So although menstrual cycle doesn't carry on, there is that minimum. It's usually around 14 to 50. I don't want to be wrong, but I want to check. I'll check that later. But I think it's around 14% of fat percentage. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it depends on the weight, height, the ethnicity of the individual, because the metrics will be different. But we just don't go there. With males, just to give you an idea, I was responsible for nutrition for the lightweight men. When was that? 3 years ago, I think. And our coach was very tall. And, of course, the coach was like, you try and get him as skinny as you can. I'm like, yeah, he still needs to have some cognitive function. So with males, you can go down to 4%. It's not healthy, but you can. And I see that. So 4% of fat. Whereas with females, the baseline is around 14, 12%. So that's a huge difference.
Yeah. Definitely.
But let me just rephrase it. Yeah. So the period stops because the athlete doesn't eat enough to support the training, the volume and the intensity of the training that is being thrown at them. Also, the appetite. So there is a hormone, which I forgot now, the one that's responsible for you actually feeling hungry. The more you train,
ghrelin.
There you go, ghrelin. They're very nice. So the less release of it you'll have. So you actually have to force yourself to eat, or be very disciplined to eat, knowing that you don't want it, but you have to.
Because ghrelin's linked to IGF-1.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome.
I find it quite fascinating. Yeah, no, the endocrine system thing's fascinating me. But I guess more on the men's side, hence things, researching just looking how can I be more healthy, and kept popping up. If you're not sleeping very well, you have inconsistent sleep, and you're very stressed, your cortisol level will be high, your tests will drop, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to ask is so I guess again, it's just kind of a typical question. It's RED-S. Okay, so you're a bit tired.
Mm-hmm.
That's normal. You're an athlete. You should be a bit tired. How does RED-S differ from just having a few days off and recovering? It's seems to be that the body's got to a point where it can't do that normal system. Is it just chronic? Is it something that's built up?
Yeah.
But
exactly.
what changes in the body in terms of meaning that you have to approach your recovery in a different way?
So for female athletes, what happens is the period stops. And then in terms of hormonal functions, they are suppressed. So you don't have your normal levels of estrogen or progesterone. There isn't enough produced in the body to cause ovulation, right? So there isn't enough because your body's focusing on thermoregulation and locomotion. So the endocrine system it's not shut down, but it's suppressed to a point the longer you are in that state, the more dangerous it becomes, especially for bone density. So that once you recognize, so the first stage before REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport, is the low energy availability. That's what I meant. So this is literally your energy intake minus your energy expenditure and what's left for you at the end of the day. There is something called basic metabolic or basal metabolic rate as well. So that is the minimum amount of calories that you have to consume per day in order to survive. So you never want to go below that. So the very, I think a good start to the conversation with this is to have your body composition analysis done. Actually, the BMR can be calculated with a simple equation that, of course, I don't remember now.
Harris-Benedict.
Say it again.
You can, I think you can calculate it with the Harris-Benedict formula.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. So, and then that gives you the number that you should never go below, because it disrupts your endocrine system even more. See, once you recognize all of these symptoms, what you need to do is to try and get out of it as soon as you can. So in the team, if you have a nutritionist available, which I know is a luxury, I understand that. But if you do, this is your first point of contact, right? How do we increase the calorific intake of my food? So it's not slowing me down, but it's adding dense calories to what you're eating. So how do we do that safely? Also, another thing would be to increase total muscle mass, right? Which is, again, very tricky to do with endurance sports because of the volume of endurance sport that you're actually doing. Yeah. It's quite difficult, as you guys know, throughout the season to put on muscle mass, right? So then the question is like, again, performance versus health with the head coaches, because at the end of the day, it's their call. I can only tell my truth and show the science, but it is their call at the end of the day. Obviously, the athlete themselves, they can do what they can themselves, but usually if it's not driven by the head coach, it's very difficult to get it out of them.
So in terms of like applying and using the right nutrition,
yes,
what are like some of the foods that like should fill up most of your plate during the week and other things like that?
I'm always worried about this because I'm not a nutritionist, so I have to say it. I used to work for Bupa as a clinical health advisor, and one of the things that was responsible is to advise on nutrition as well. I wouldn't want to go into that because I'm more towards high protein and I just don't want to give any misinformation, if that's okay.
Sure thing.
That's fine. I've heard a lot of, I've certainly heard athletes who've gone to nutritionists, and one of the benefits of going to see them is to say that, I feel like finally someone gave me permission to eat enough.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm an athlete, especially if you're a lightweight rower or we're in a power to weight sport. A lot of people just feel like they should be eating less or they should be having less fat. Like there's so many other myths around it. So yeah, I think like I agree with you. Like obviously speak to a nutritionist who actually knows. But like from that perspective, I've spoken to a bunch of people who are like, I was totally not eating enough. And again, like one thing I would recommend when I was coaching athletes, if they were trying to put on weight or anything like that, be like, get a tracking app. Track everything you eat for a week. I promise you, you're not eating as much as you like. I've never found anyone who's putting more calories in than they think. Yeah. Like it's always lower.
Yeah.
So that's always sort of fascinated me.
Another big one is at the moment the insulin resistance. I don't advertise any brands, but basically what you do, insulin resistance reading, right? So that's been designed for diabetics. However, it kind of went into the sports world, and now when you see all of the big athletes, they wear it. So it monitors your insulin level in real time. So whatever you're eating, you can see how much sugar is going into the bloodstream and what's your insulin response. The whole notion is that you want to eat your complex carbohydrates, so the ones that release the energy for longer. So then I see our athletes eating white toast and jam, and there's like having a stroke, touch wood, on the inside, and that's still there. That is still there. There was on Instagram, CUBC, they've got the like ask a question on Monday or something. They were all saying what they're eating, and I was looking at it and thinking, okay, actually one of my CB's men, he said that he's got banana and some peanut butter, and I was like, yes, okay, one, but the rest of them, it's all carbs and sugar, so that notion is still there. But as you said, most of the athletes don't eat enough, don't eat frequently enough. They don't really use the metabolic window after training to replenish the protein, to trigger muscle protein synthesis. They don't eat enough during training. If they do, they use the gels, which are mostly fructose based and are sitting in your gut, so they never really get even into your bloodstream. So there is a lot about nutrition, and again, I could talk about it, but it's more of one of the things I'm interested in. I read about it very actively and help when I can. But I would advise to go and see a nutritionist and kind of be in charge of that. But there is a lot.
I'm interested in your opinion on the metabolic window, because I've heard a lot of people who say it's rubbish.
What did you hear?
It just makes sense, isn't it, that within half an hour of having some exercise, you would replenish your stores. I mean, I think it's varied. You know, you see products advertised for like pre, post, and during, like glycogen during. Like, come on, how long is your weight session or whatever?
Yeah.
But what would you say?
So it varies from female to like gender as well. For males, the window is a little bit longer. So you guys can get away with eating up to 40 minutes. But the protocol that I go by, and we've been going by it for a long time, is 30 grams protein straight after you finish. Okay. So that's general, depending on obviously if you're open weight or if you're lightweight rower, that will slightly vary, because I just might add some extra bits to it for them. But usually that's the 30 grams that I would use for high intensity sessions and for strength sessions. I wouldn't necessarily give them protein after like steady state. We wouldn't really go there. Yes, there is a metabolic window. The research is varies if it comes to like how big the window is. With females, it's better to actually consume from like 1 minute to 20 minutes, like straight after post training, and replenish that.
Is there a reason for that?
Yes, because you want to, what you're doing during exercise is that you're tearing the muscle, right? So what you want to do is maximize recovery, trigger muscle protein synthesis by adding that extra protein. So if you look at research, 30 grams is what is suggested. That's all coming from the bodybuilding world, but it's been kind of expanded now to every sport. It's kind of, I want to say it's common knowledge, because it does change, honestly, like it does change every year is different.
Yeah.
But with females, we have a little bit less time because of how we metabolize food in general. So like with females, we do that 20 minutes is crucial. If you still do it up to 30 minutes, it's still better than nothing.
So just pack a few chicken drumsticks and keep them in your pocket handy.
Don't give them ideas like that, because that's gonna happen. Like honestly, you can see that happening in eggs in the pockets. And but there are some people who don't want to do protein in the powder, and that's also fine. So then you would have some people having Greek yogurt with almonds. So you would have some people. I haven't seen anyone eating an egg yet.
Really?
Yet. No, maybe I just don't spend enough time with them, thanks God. So that's that's that. Metabolic window exists, definitely.
That's good.
It does, research states.
I'm interested as well when you mentioned about the insulin resistance thing.
Yes.
So that's, again, like that's going to massively affect the endocrine system.
Yeah.
What more have you kind of go into?
So with insulin resistance, the idea is that we're trying to keep the line as flat as we can. So the way it works is that if you eat something sugary, so very sugary, so we say chocolate, for example, you get a spike of insulin. It's not really the greatest, first of all, for health. Second of all, for performance, because that's going to give you the really short burst of energy, but then you're going to hit the wall very quickly. The longer we can release the carbohydrates into the bloodstream, the more sustainable it is, the better and healthier it is. So this is literally what we're going by. Obviously, we're humans at the end of the day, so once in a while you allow yourself your favorite food, whatever that is. But in general, Monday to Friday, try and keep your insulin levels steady and go by that. And then you will see a difference in how you're adapting to training. Definitely.
Do you think if you like malnutrition yourself irregularly,
Yes.
you can like you can like put your body into like sort of a confusion mode. So like that's the reason why you want to like introduce regular sort of behaviors and teach your body to like that it can expect certain foods or certain types of nutrition at certain windows.
Yeah, but it's also very dependent on how old they are. Because now I look at the CUBC men's side and some of the guys who are very good rowers and what they're eating, I'm sometimes thinking. So you can get away with that, I suppose, until you're 30, you can get away with loads of stuff. But after the age of 30, you need to nail down nutrition. Otherwise, it just becomes very hard to recover and produce the same results.
Yeah, I definitely have a worry that I have for 10 years. Absolutely.
How old are you? You're like 28.
I'm 35.
Oh.
Yeah. Thanks, though. Yeah, I'll
Don't
take
worry,
that.
I'm still older than you, fine.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's not get into this.
Yeah, for 10 years, eating 5 or 6 times a day and with incredibly high non-complex carb food at all times. Certainly, I couldn't put weight on. Like, I could eat anything, not put any weight on. But I must have been absolutely blasting my insulin system, and I don't know how long it's capable of just going.
Do you have any diabetics in the family?
No, I got a bit worried at one point that I might have it. I was like waking up a lot and going to the loo in the night and things like that.
Yeah.
But I went and had blood tests and they said I'm happy.
That's good.
now. But yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
I mean, obviously, the longer the life goes, right, the more we learn and the more we realize that actually we can't necessarily get away with stuff that we were doing 5 years ago. I mean, we can, but how are you going to feel? Like, with your body, everything just slows down, right? So you need to try and nail it down as much as you can, even just for daily living, not necessarily for performance, just feeling better about yourself, right?
Yeah.
No.
Definitely.
So what are other ways, other than nutrition, that we can leverage the female physiology in order to produce better results?
So I think we should address the elephant in the room and actually talk about menstrual cycle, right? So the way menstrual cycle works is that there are the 4 hormones that I mentioned before that are circulating in the bloodstream. An average menstrual cycle lasts from about 21 to 40 days. It's very individual. It depends on your age, and it depends on many other factors in your life. So yeah, we have 4 hormones that govern the menstrual cycle. So estrogen and progesterone are the ones that are widely known or heard of. And there's also FSH, which is follicular stimulating hormone, and LH, which is luteinizing hormone. So what they do, they pretty much govern estrogen and progesterone above other else as well. What happens with period and ovulation is that from the first day of period to ovulation, we have a spike of estrogen. What it means is that, first of all, we need to know that estrogen isn't equivalent to testosterone in males. So it gives you that natural advantage or readiness to perform. It's actually an ergogenic aid. So the spike of estrogen allows female athletes to adapt better to volume, to intensity, to the type of training, to recover faster. Thermoregulation is at its highest. So if you have to compete in the high temperatures and you've got that estrogen surge, actually your body will do absolutely great at removing all of the excess of sweat and just getting rid of heat. So that is the time. Then when ovulation hits, estrogen goes down, progesterone goes up. Progesterone is catabolic in nature. I don't want to demonize progesterone. Progesterone is great. It's good. We need it for healthy balance in the endocrine system. But what it does, it actually breaks the tissue down. So it doesn't allow for that same adaptation and recovery as estrogen does. What happens when the progesterone goes up is that the body core temperature goes up. We naturally put in up to 2 kilograms of water, and just fluids. And suddenly the perception of the training of intensity is harder than it was in the estrogen surge. And I know there will be lots of people saying, oh, there isn't enough research. Actually, for this particular thing, there is research. You just need to know what you search for. But there is quite not a huge body of evidence. Obviously, the area still needs research, but there is enough evidence to draw conclusions that actually, rather than looking at general training periodization model, which was based on male data, as we talked about it, and pushing your athletes through that 6 or 8 weeks of mesocycle, the mesocycle for a female should be shorter. So we shouldn't push them for the same exercise, for the same intensity of the exercise for 8 weeks, because it's just not optimizing anything. It's going to make them better, yeah, to a point. It's not going to optimize the training. So if we know that we have that window of opportunity when our athletes can endure pretty much everything, why don't we change the way we program the training, right? So that is the big question. I mean, I kind of know the answers why coaches don't want to do it, because it's a logistical nightmare. Because this is a person who has a period and doesn't take any hormonal contraception, right? So this is how the period works. Then what happens if you're on a pill or taking any type of hormonal contraception, patch or a coil? what it does, it suppresses ovulation. So everything that we just discussed doesn't apply. The most common one is the combined pill. So people are usually taking a combined pill. It's got a synthetic derivative. It's very important to say a synthetic derivative of estrogen and progesterone. And what it does, it suppresses ovulation. When you take the pill at the same time every day, you get a little spike of estrogen and progesterone. And then after 12 hours, it goes down. Then you take the pill, goes up and down. So rather than menstrual cycle looking like estrogen going up, ovulation goes down, progesterone goes up, you just get those little dips on hormonal contraception, right? So that's another group that would be training differently. Then you have athletes who don't eat enough to fuel, they don't eat enough to train. So then with them, the approach to training should be different as well. We reduce the volume by as much as the head coach agrees to. And then we introduce hypertrophy. So we're trying to put as much muscle mass on them as we can. So we increase overall body weight. So essentially you've got those 3 different groups. And also within a normal menstrual cycle, healthy menstrual cycle, you need to divide it into 2 as well, because you've got that estrogen surge and then you've got the progesterone group, which is a little bit sluggish and won't be necessarily able to adjust to the same volume of the training. It's very important to say as well that VO2 max, again, that's been researched. Of course, it needs more research, but there is evidence there already. VO2 max stays the same with endurance sports. It doesn't necessarily affect it as much, but you still have to start. You still have to accelerate. So what storage are you going to use for that? Mm-hmm. So this is the biggest difference. Now, how do we organize the training that actually suits our athletes? And athletes are healthy and they benefit from it. So we don't carry on the same thing because we train them that way and it works. And you guys know how it works, right? I mean, we've been doing it for X amount of years and it works. Look, we still win. Yes, but the question is do we want to optimize? Do we want to look after our athletes' health? Or do we just carry on doing what we're doing because it works and this is how much we need? We just need to win one race against Oxford, right?
Yeah. The old British saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
Which sometimes, when you're in a high performance sport, it's not necessarily conducive to winning. And certainly when you've got other teams who maybe aren't winning or aren't doing as well, who are looking at these things, it's one thing getting on top, it's another thing staying there, and you need to look at these things. I think another thing I saw in the book, which blew my mind a little bit, is that I think in the progesterone spike, spatial awareness goes down.
Oh yes, coordination in general.
Crazy.
So sports,
Wow.
Right? So sports, I sometimes play volleyball, I must say that. So when I have my moments, I'm also very, very aware of it, which also doesn't help. So that would be an area for a psychologist to work with, because if you inform your athletes about this, I'm in a high progesterone, I'm not going to adapt as well. How do we go around that? Because that becomes a placebo thing. I mean, not necessarily a placebo, but
sure.
It can be a placebo, right? Mm-hmm. So that's also another, my brain works in so many different directions because I really feel like I know this is the future. It's just with every change, no one wants to change. And no one wants me to come in and tell them, listen, these are the ingredients, you do whatever with it. But there is a massive potential. And suddenly you have a coach who is quite secure with what he or she are doing. And then I'm saying, well, actually we can make this better, but this requires a big change to what you're doing. Of course, no one will want to do it, right? So you just pick the pieces that you can add to the program without making a massive, interruption in your thinking process and how you want to put the training program together. So I think that it's difficult. It is difficult for me to knowing what I know, but also very diplomatically try and kind of get it there.
Totally understand. I mean, it's easy. It's way easier to keep things as status quo than it is to think about ways of optimization. But my question is, for example, say a female athlete is going to listen to this and she'll think, okay, great. I know now that my body behaves in a different way. How can I feasibly, if my coach want to adapt the program, how can I feasibly make adjustments and what will that look like on an individual basis? So what can you do to your own training to take advantage of this information?
Yeah. So this is when nutrition comes in and supplementation. So it's very important to say that you can race at any part of the menstrual cycle. You can produce PBs in the high progesterone. You can produce PBs in your sorry, did I say estrogen or progesterone?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Either.
You can do your thing.
But that was my next question.
There you go. See, I was just like thinking ahead. So you can do that. You just have to know what to do in terms of nutrition and how to bring general inflammation down. I didn't say about it. So progesterone produces high inflammation in the body as well. So you want to minimize the inflammation as much as you can. There is nutrition. There is cryotherapy that you can use as well. And a year ago, I actually had some professors approaching me asking about the possibility of PhD in research. I was like, this is great, but I have no life. So maybe in a few years. But I'm very interested to see how much we can bring the inflammation down just by doing cryotherapy in the high progesterone phase. But anyway, going back to your question. Yes, you can bring the inflammation down with nutrition. So the big three ones are omega-3, zinc, and magnesium. Yes, yeah, that brings the inflammation down. BCAA, branched-chain amino acids, which doesn't have to be, so this is a building block for protein, and it doesn't have to be taken from the powder. I know there are some people who just don't want to do it, which is absolutely fine. You can have it from food. The problem arises when you're a vegan or vegetarian, because it might not be available to you within the food that you have for yourself. So the volume and intensity stays the same, fine, but we can enhance the recovery by eating the right foods and supplementing if this is something that you want to do. There is a way around it. You just need to know how to do it, and you need to start tracking your menstrual cycle. That is the most important thing to start from now on. You guys can start that as well.
I don't know at which point I'm in my cycle.
I really wish my wife would do this, because she's been trying to lose weight recently, and about roughly once a month she'll be like, "Oh my God, I'm heavy. I'm so much heavy." And then 2 days later she'll be like, "Oh, I'm on." This happens every month.
I want to give her credit. She's lost 15 kilos in like 3 months. She's done incredible work.
Measuring her weight on a daily basis and feeling depressed for 3 days.
That's the thing that it can be. I mean, you get the results, but how do you feel about it? Like, how much did it cost you to actually get there? If you can do the same thing without feeling how you're feeling about yourself, not necessarily the greatest, and putting all of that effort into it, why don't we do it, right? But it's, again, the knowledge has to come out.
Yeah, and there's a perfect world, and then there's the real world that we live in. Like, there's everything we wish we could perfectly be doing, and then there's like having to fit it into your life that, your life exactly for that. What else you have to do other than training? It's like at Cambridge, these guys are all supposed to be students studying PhDs,
of course.
Spending their whole day doing that. I was also quite fascinated that you said that you can still perform at your best at any point in your cycle, because I know from the past, I know of some girls who rode who basically would stay on the pill all the time in order to not, like, obviously during competition, not have to think about that kind of thing. I mean, I know you're not a doctor, but I'm assuming you're going to say, like, that is not a good idea.
So let me just say that I actually had a chance to apply all of this in 2000. When did they win? When did we have Grace and Ruby?
2022, last year, 2022.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
That's when I worked with them, and they applied all of that. And they set a record for the course. Lightweight women won by 15 lengths, 15.15. And the second boat won as well. I don't want to say it was me, because it was not. I understand how performance works. There are those little bits that add together.
You've certainly played a part in it, though.
I think I did. And I think they also said that to me. But even with Ruby and Grace, how they approached me, they said to me, "Listen, we've never done this before. And this feels right." Was a testimonial itself for the work that I'm doing, that it is worth it. On a daily basis, I wouldn't know what would be the outcome. So for me, the whole experience was very stressful, because at the same time, they're athletes that have to obviously teach how to lift. So not only doing that, but also covering, first of all, the basics, that they're moving the barbell safely, that they know how to apply force, that they can add velocity to the weights, and we're getting all of those. And me just constantly thinking, is this actually the way, and then them being in charge of the program, because then they would have to learn when is the high hormone phase, low hormone phase. But again, like I think in general with female athletes, it's a little bit more difficult to work with them as a group, because they're not necessarily very honest with you. If they don't like something, they're just going to turn around and kind of just stay with the little groups and discuss it amongst themselves and never really face isn't the word, but never really talk to you about it. Mm-hmm. Whereas I felt like we got to that point with that group that they all bought into what we were doing. And I think it's the giving them the knowledge and them being in charge of their cycles and actually seeing the difference, how much they can lift and how they recover, and having that knowledge. And I feel like I'm off topic now. What was the question?
No, I mean, this is pretty good, especially like considering that Grace at that point has won an Olympic gold medal. Yeah. So to be doing like optimizations that like even at an Olympic level you haven't done, like that's we can call that world leading research and initiative.
It's amazing. And also like they were coming from, I think at that stage New Zealand wasn't lifting weights either. I think they were just relying on training basically in the boat. So them also coming back and starting to lift weights a little bit. Obviously it's not my position. They're at that level that I would never like try and push them in any direction. But also just working with them was, very rewarding in the sense that I feel like they bought into what I was trying to teach the whole group. And that was.
So having sort of said, like, as an individual, what sort of things you can do, as a coming from a coach's perspective, we were talking to Ross Hunter, Leander a couple of weeks ago, the head women's coach, and talking about how he's having these conversations which initially were difficult, but are now, like you said, have become more normalized and not a problem to talk about. I guess what are some of the examples that Cambridge, obviously, like maybe Paddy had put in place, or in general that coaches can do?
So I think the most important thing is to have one person designated to talk to about menstrual cycle. I don't feel very comfortable talking about my menstrual cycle, and I am old. I'm not an athlete. I'm not vulnerable. No one is like gonna tell me if I'm gonna make the boat or not make the boat. So I'm not emotionally fragile at this stage of my life, and it's still quite difficult conversation for me to have. Obviously, the more I talk about it, the more I don't care. But like initially, that is my response. Like, why do you wanna know? I think educating from the very beginning, what I did with, in 2022, we started with a survey that, again, I came up with all of the questions. So I'm not saying this is the only way. Again, we were kind of doing all of these new things and just give them open questions, talk about the relationship with food, talk about also the menstrual cycle, hormonal contraception in general, like have they ever experienced X, Y, Z? So at the beginning of the season, of course, not everyone will open, which I'm fully aware about it. But if they want to talk, they will give you a little bit more of a background. And that's how we create the channels to start talking about it. I am not a fan of coaches coming around and being like, oh, are you on your high estrogen or high progesterone? Like, this is how we shut down. And that is the problem. Like, we don't have it's there, people starting to hear bits that on menstrual cycle, but this conversation has to be prepared. There has to be a person who's designated that, okay, this person is going to talk to you about it. If you have any questions, talk to them. And then usually that's how we create links with athletes and how they start to trust you and they start to open up and how they feel. But also there are apps that can be used, right? So with the apps, you literally, and again, I'm not in favor of any particular brand, but that can be done in a less intrusive way. So you literally just record the symptoms and you just say, okay, so this is where I am with my menstrual cycle. So then the coaches have the information. What they do with it, it's a totally different story. But I think that definitely helps. That would definitely move things forward. Like, why are we not getting the results that we're supposed to be getting with my training periodization, or like any other person who's in charge of training periodization or a coach? Why, right? If you have more data saying, well, you have these people in high progesterone, maybe not producing their best, you just understand more why they might not be producing it. So it might not be the flow in the program. It's just how we are adjusting the intensity for that person for that particular day. Yeah.
So definitely this is the way that has worked for you. And I think it's good for other people like to hear it. Is the openness. There's a certain way to to approach these topics,
Yes.
and then just have the data available so that you can draw the conclusions should you need to, or you're not wondering like, is my program not working? No, actually, physiologically, this is just where we are.
Yeah.
And then, so my question is, does that change in any way? Obviously, Helen Glover is a big topic right now because she's a mother who's coming back to row.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, does that change at all after pregnancy?
After pregnancy, it does. Of course it does. It also depends on how early you start, because there is I keep forgetting hormones. So it's the hormones that's responsible for relaxing your ligaments and joints in general. And if you're breastfeeding, that stays in the body for a quite long time. Again, I haven't looked into pregnancy and post-pregnancy research for a while. The last time was when I was pregnant, but that was a while ago. So I would have to look into that, but it does. It does as well. The adaptation and also low energy availability is a big thing. If you're still breastfeeding, you should be consuming more calories anyway. And if you're adding, it's around 400 calories, I think 200 to 400 calories per day for general population. So if we're adding the training and the volume on top, so yeah, adjustments have to be definitely.
That's an extra meal.
That's an extra meal, because
You're giving one away.
Extra meal at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it dehydrates you a lot as well. So liquid intake is a big one as well when you're breastfeeding.
Yeah. And then also presumably when we get older and hormones change in that way, that's a whole nother thing to discuss.
Yeah, it is. But also that's another area of interest, this perimenopause and menopause. This is huge subject. And this is usually a group of people that usually have money, usually want to learn more, understand their bodies, and they want to stay active. And there isn't enough information. The general information on Google is still go for a walk or go for a jog. We should be increasing protein intake. We should be decreasing carbs. During perimenopause, what happens, your body doesn't really tolerate fructose as well that well. Mm-hmm. So let's not demonize fructose. It's great. Fruits are great, vitamins, minerals. But for some reason, body doesn't really do great if it comes to digestion of it. And you need to make that shift. And you need to understand that actually with menopause is actually one day in the calendar when your body stops to produce estrogen and progesterone. Everything leading to that. So the side effects that women are experiencing, the sweats, the mood swings, it's all caused by the fact that you get a decline in estrogen. And that lasts for about 5 to 6 years, but the estrogen completely die off, right? It's very sad when you look at the graph. It's like flat line afterwards. But then you get testosterone that somehow, so testosterone doesn't decline that rapidly. So after menopause, you get a pretty steady kind of stream of testosterone. So then that can take the role of producing muscle mass and just looking after the muscle protein synthesis side of it. So there is a lot there. Like I am.
Would that testosterone aromatize?
Yes.
In that, or will it not produce it? Because testosterone can aromatize into. Would the body not do that in women?
Not necessarily. So we've got a quite steady flow of testosterone. It still declines, but not as rapidly as estrogen and progesterone.
Interesting.
So that is, you can still, and you should be lifting weight, because the risk of osteoporosis goes through the window. So if you don't actively preserve your muscle mass, you have the risk of falling. So that's why we hear people falling and dying and breaking the bones. So for female lives, a big one is at the age of 30, but that's for both gender. So until the age of 30, the body has developed all of the systems. I'm sorry, you're 35. You've already.
I know, I'm over the hill.
So you're already over the hill. Another one for females, so that's for males. Another one for females is perimenopause. That's another point where we really have to encourage the body to produce more, to give it more protein, produce more muscle mass to protect the bone. So we prevent the osteoporosis, right? And then another big one is at the age of 70, where literally like muscle mass just drops down like very rapidly. So after that time, if you don't do anything actively to keep the muscle mass high and to stay mobile, then it's just very easy to just fall down and break a bone, and that's it.
Yeah, I'm seeing so much stuff. I'm reading stuff about how weight training is just like stop doing everything else and start lifting weights.
Yeah, I mean,
your muscle mass,
yeah.
whatever you do, you're losing from the age of 30, it's like 3% a year or something.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
If you don't do anything actively about it, yeah,
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Awesome.
All these changes.
Depression all over.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Kerry.
All these changes, like, obviously happen in your body on a regular basis. Like, what kind of psychological toll does that take on an athlete, and how do you try and, like, neutralize the effects of this? Like, how do you stay sane, essentially, is what I'm trying to ask.
I think it's years of experience of trying to, live with estrogen and progesterone surge. It is a difficult task, but it can be managed just by saying to female athletes that they can perform their best at their period, actually. So this is the time when you can produce the PB. You can produce PB at any time, but what happens is that your body knows that pregnancy is not an option. So it focuses on energy production and locomotion. So, again, going back to the lightweight rowers that I had the privilege to be part of coaching staff for, we won by 15 lengths, but I know where they were in their cycle as well, and they were all in the prime. So we know that the estrogen was flying really, really high. So of course it was the physical preparation of it, but there was also the endocrine system that was in favor for most of them in that boat in that day.
Was that planned that way?
You can't plan it.
No.
It just happened to be. But I think shifting, I think you mentioned the contraceptive pill as well.
Yeah.
There's that misconception that if you remove period, then you don't have to worry about anything. You have to worry about quite a lot of stuff, actually. But the period is the ergogening aid that actually gives you an advantage. So, of course, we can't tell anyone, okay, stop taking the pill because that makes you slower. No, it's an individual choice. What your doctor says you do, if you're okay with that choice, we will work around it. But it's important to give the information to the athletes. Right, listen, if you get on the pill, you're going to take away massive ergogening aid away from you. But then there is also, like, the spectrum of pregnancy or performance, right? Because we still obviously don't want young people to get pregnant if that's what they don't want to do, right? And that's important to say, that there is it's an athlete's decision what they're going to do, as long as we have the information and we help them with whatever decision they make. And that is very important to say, I think.
What are some other side effects of, for example, being on a pill that can, like, affect your performance negatively?
It's more health issues. So it wouldn't necessarily impact the performance. The only thing that I can think of in terms of performance is the estrogen, that you'd never have that surge of estrogen, so you won't really know how good you can be. So you take that away from yourself. But there is a list of health concerns with contraceptive pill that I don't think we should be covering it today. I'm literally very fresh after the movie, and it's buzzing in my head how we start to put younger and younger girls on contraceptive pills, and we say to them, well, we don't. Medical professionals say to them, yeah, this is going to help with your skin, or it's going to regulate your cycle. The pill cannot regulate your cycle. What the pill does, it suppresses the ovulation. So I don't know if you guys know, but, like, you get a box, you take tablets for 3 weeks, and then you stop for a week and you bleed. And people think that this is your period. This is not your period. This is literally withdrawal from bleeding. So essentially what you're doing, you're stopping all of the hormonal, you're stopping the endocrine system to do what it's designed to do. So that with the pill, there is quite a lot that should be addressed. So the females actually know what they're taking, rather than, there you go, you're 14, take a pill, right?
Are you saying long-term you're shutting down the endocrine system?
You are. That's what you're doing with the pill.
No, as in, even when you come off it, it doesn't.
No. It should go back. It should go back to normal. There are different situations. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But it should. The idea is that it should go back to normal.
Yeah, because from the men's side, obviously, when people do a lot of testosterone, then it.
People are worried that they're not going to get pregnant, but there is absolutely no rule to it. Sometimes people get off the pill, they get pregnant straight away. So some people don't, and that's just the way it is. But I mean, honestly, looking into the pill, the more I read about it, the more I'm absolutely petrified of what we're doing to females. Something that should be liberating us, it's actually putting a strain on our health.
Yeah, definitely. The more I've researched, or the more knowledge I have on the endocrine system, the more insane it seems that we're just popping pills on a daily basis, men and women in different ways, to just mess like that. Thing's really important. And we're just like,
and also that notion that we're going to regulate your menstrual cycle. This is not regulating anything. It's suppressing your ovulation. It's not going to help you. And also it's very dangerous for females with low energy availability, because if you put someone on the pill who's already not eating enough, you won't really know, because the period's not going to stop because it's not there. So you have no warning signs apart from the fact that you see that your athlete is just exhausted and is super skinny, right?
Yeah.
I was going to ask about how thyroid affects your training and what are like some of the things that you should keep in mind or be conscious of when dealing with, for example, problems with it, whether it's over or underactivity.
So again, I don't really feel like I should be giving advice on this particular topic. The most important thing is to get your blood test done, and whatever your doctor will decide to do, then we literally just go by that. So I wouldn't really want to dig into that one, but it's a big one. I know it is a big one. So that should be governed by the doctor really with the thyroid. Thyroid is the first one. If you don't eat enough food, it's going to be dysregulated. So again, I don't think trying to regulate it in the medical way is the way. We should be making sure that our athletes eat the most. I kind of just want to approach it from that angle.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any
Not
books?
the most, but like enough. Say it again.
Are there any like books or resources that you can recommend if someone would like to learn about that?
Totally. Do I do it now, or should I give?
Yeah.
So I would really like to invite everyone to read Dr. Nikki Kay's book, Hormones, Health, and Human Potential. She's actually an alumni of Cambridge. There you go. There it is. Hey, where do I show it? So this is the one. She's actually a Cambridge alumni. She comes to Cambridge every year to do a talk. So you actually have a chance to ask her the questions. And also Dr. Stacey Sims, but everyone who knows me know that like I just recommend Dr. Stacey Sims. General training, adaptation, and menstrual cycle, and strength training and nutrition. She's an exercise physiologist, and she's the first person I really got introduced to if it comes to menstrual cycle and my passion for it now.
Cool. Awesome. Is there anything on your presentation that we should go over? Or
let me have a look. I think... Oh, yeah. So PMS is a big one. We didn't talk about PMS. So PMS, that's the premenstrual syndrome. I think that's what it means. Basically, what happens is that's the highest inflammation in the body. So this is the time when we feel sluggish. We don't really produce as much power as we should in comparison to the lower to high estrogen phase. Also, the two phases are called the one with high estrogen is called follicular phase, and the one with high progesterone is luteal phase. That's important to say. So what I did with the rowers when I worked with them with CUBC, I came up with a PMS protocol. So literally what to eat the 7 to 10 days before your period to minimize the inflammation. So again, omega-3, zinc, magnesium, BCAAs were like kind of the big ones that we had on the list to consume. You should be consuming more protein as well. So generally, I go towards the higher end of protein. In general, with my athletes, it doesn't matter what gender, which is 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And I recommend that with females on a high estrogen. On a high progesterone, we go towards 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Your body actually needs more energy during that time, during high progesterone and PMS to bring the inflammation down and just to make sure that we're actually allowing the adaptation to happen, just to have the best chance to do it. Another thing that I wanted to say is about lightweight rowers and how tracking menstrual cycle affects them. And the fact knowing, if we know the date straight away when they're going to compete and they track their menstrual cycle, we can prepare them in advance. If they're going to be in a high hormone phase, so with the high progesterone, knowing that the body is going to already weigh more than what it normally does, so even up to 2 kilograms. If you track it, the beauty of tracking is that you know how high you can go with the weight. If it's relatively stable, your weight doesn't fluctuate too much, then you'll know how much you can put on as well. If we know in advance then that they're going to be in that high hormone phase, we know that we need to start losing weight before, not wait till that moment and hope that it's going to work and, dehydrate our athletes and the whole lightweight thing, it just gives me a heart attack each time I have to participate in in helping them to get ready. And also the fact how male side, they've got an average and females have to be on 59 kilos, which is like, for anyone who was setting the rules, who understands physiology, would know that this is a very bad decision. This is just promoting difficult relationship with food, eating disorders. And with eating disorders, I don't really mean bulimia or anorexia. It's literally everything that's in between. And I've I am very close to those athletes. The athletes I work with, they tell me a lot of stuff. Sometimes I don't want to know it, but they just tell me because I smile. So I feel like they feel like they can connect with me, which is great. But also sometimes with the amount of knowledge that I come out home and I'm thinking, what can I do? How can I help them? With some of the stuff I can report to the coach. Some of the stuff I'm left with as well. That's just on a personal note, that it's also being in the background is not sometimes that easy when you have so many of them, knowing how young they are. And that they're just getting started, right? In life, like in training in general. Yeah,
it's definitely, we've spoken to some coaches who don't really, are not interested in coaching lightweights. Not because they don't like that type of sport, but more because they feel like they want to focus on maximizing the potential of their athletes. And it seems like very difficult to maximize someone's performance and potential if you're artificially keeping their weight down. But that's part of weight in sports. It is what it is. We're not the only sport that does it. I think at least in one sense that the in rowing, the weigh-in, I think it's like 3 hours before race, 4 hours before race time.
But also that's like, then why do you do it in the first place? They're still going to eat, so they're never going to race at that weight, right?
Yeah.
So that is,
but like compared to fight weight, when they weigh in the day before and then they have 24 hours to like lose I've heard stories of people losing 12 kilos. Like, well, some people have even died doing it as well. Obviously, diuretics come into play, things like that.
Sport will set you free. And not if you're lucky enough, like only diuretics, like some coaches, honestly, what they suggest to their athletes. And again, now we're going into safeguarding and those issues. Now, again, you shouldn't maybe going into that area, but it's scary how much power the head coach has over athletes. I think that's what I wanted to say. Everyone can interpret it in the way they want to, but sometimes I'm petrified of that, especially that like male figure head coach and a 19-year-old female athlete who will do everything to be in the boat, right?
Yeah.
So that always, but that's not only rowing, that's in general. But again, the more I kind of work with sport, the more I observe, because I don't want to say I'm set in what I'm doing, because I'm still exploring, I'm still testing what works, what doesn't, but I'm kind of pretty much set in what I have to do to get someone from A to B. But the more I see that, the power dynamic, that freaks me out.
Yeah, we've talked a lot before about the huge responsibility of coaches to be in control of people who are willing to do anything to achieve their goals. And I think when it comes down to, we talked about what can coaches do, what can coaches put in place, and you talked about how change is difficult. I think it's important as a coach to sit back and look at why you're doing things a certain way and, but the program works like this. Well, but so are you... You should be looking to maximize performance, not just having an easy ride. Are you keeping this program because it's just easier? Because then all my male and female athletes can train in the same way and it's easier. Well, then I think you need to have a talk with yourself and be like, but what's my job? Is it to have an easy ride or is it to maximize performance? Yeah. So I think if you keep that in mind, then those changes become easy decisions. Talk about free speed. Like, do you want your boat to go faster? Yes, please. Well, let's make these changes.
Yeah. And also the constant battle of health versus performance. That is also very difficult. And that's more evident with female athletes than males. Obviously, it's still there. I'm not diminishing the problems that male group has, and that's absolutely fine. I mean, I'm responsible this season for them. So I understand those problems as well. But I know women are more vulnerable, and not only psychologically, but the psychological bit comes from the endocrine system anyway. It's all coming from the fact how we are wired. Yeah, that's it.
on the
kind
back.
of, I entered like the darkness a little bit. But anyway, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. On the back of one of those books that you've suggested, it says that females are not small men, so they shouldn't train like ones.
Yes.
How differently can you, for example, load the female body with when it comes to like putting weight, when it comes to putting muscle on, or like increasing stamina or endurance?
Yeah, I think it's all coming back to the estrogen surge and progesterone. Just knowing when the windows of opportunity are and when you can maximize the training and when you should deload or maybe not put that much volume on them. So it's literally just tuning into the menstrual cycle in the sense that if they track, then you'll know how to periodize differently. And this is a challenge because not many people do that. Not many coaches do it. I know the Lionesses, they do training according to menstrual cycle and they do cryo as well. So it's quite good to see that we are like a little bit ahead as well. And we do that as well. But I think it's mainly, let's start there and see how the loading changes, how the perception of load change, and how much can we push them with that estrogen surge. I think that is number one thing to look at. And just don't follow the traditional training periodization model that we have. So that's by Bompa and Zaciorski. So that's, again, going to bodybuilding. But the whole S&C world is built on that model. So everyone will say, oh, yeah, bodybuilding. Yeah, but this is where the periodization is coming from. That is the beginning of it, really. So for females, we should go shorter cycles rather than 6 to 8 weeks. We can shorten it to 6 or even 4 weeks if someone is efficient enough to keep up with changing the program every month. But yeah, tracking the cycle, maximizing estrogen surge, and making sure that they're eating enough to endure the demands of the training.
This has been great. Thank you so much, Gosia. I'm looking forward to doing this again at some point and getting into some also like other areas in which we can like leverage this information. And for anybody who's more interested in this, like, do reach out to Light Blue Clinic and reach out to Gosia. I'm sure she'll be happy to answer some questions, but also reach out to us, and then we'll prepare another episode based off of that, and then see what other information we can bring to you in order to make more conscious and informed decisions in our training.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Well, I think this concludes everything for today's episode. So on that note, easy there.
Cue the music.